Jinkies. That was not good. I had a couple friends of mine see this movie before I did, and they all hated it, and I'd already seen a lot of the buzz online about it not being very good, and I just thought to myself that it couldn't possibly be as bad as people were saying. But hooey! It's really just not good. It's a shockingly confusing fumble of a sequel. Like, the most fun I had going to see the new Joker movie was in the car ride to and from it because I was listening to Warhammer 40k lore on the Horus Heresy. And just listening to that was better than seeing Joker Folie Deux. Fair warning, I'm going to be getting into the nitty gritty. I will be dumping spoilers on ya out the wazoo for this film just to give you my full thoughts on all of it. It is confusing how badly this movie missed the mark. Like, I know sequels are never really going to be as good as the original. That's always such a tall order. Like, that is an almost impossible Herculean task. But this one is way off. Like, it is just not close. And I wasn't surprised that there's so many musical numbers in it. That was well established a long time ago that this was going to be like a pseudo-musical to a certain extent. I'm not a fan of musicals in any way, shape, or form, really. There's a few of them I like, but overall, it's not one of my favorites. But I was willing to go in with an open mind if it was a good movie and if the musical numbers somehow added to it, but they don't. The music's fine, like I don't think the music is bad or anything, but the musical numbers actually just feel like filler content to try and distract you from how choppy and clusterfucky the movie itself is. Like, it feels like they were a big afterthought that they needed to just start inserting to fill space. Because this isn't a sequel that was planned. The Joker movie was supposed to be a one-off, but it made so much money that they came back for a sequel. And it really does feel like a soulless cash grab. It doesn't have a story to tell. It doesn't have a point. There's some cool scenes, and a couple of the musical sequences have some really impressive visuals, but they don't add anything, and a lot of the musical numbers don't even tie into the scene that preceded them. They're totally isolated in Arthur's head, like in his fantasy, and they don't actually even relate to anything narratively, so it just feels kind of worthless. Not all of them, but I'd say probably the majority of them don't actually even relate to what's happening plot-wise. They just are a random musical number. Some of them do relate and they're okay, like they're not awful, but I just think it would have been more effective if they just talked instead of sang at each other. That happens a lot. So like Arthur will be mid-conversation with somebody and then he'll just like break out into song. And I come and I cry and I look in the mirror and I say, who is that guy? Because society is seeming on the brink. And when I sleep with an itchy ass, my finger will stink. And it's like, what the fuck is this? Like, it becomes unbearable how often that happens in this movie. By the 8th or ninth musical sequence like that, I got up to go take a tinkle break, and I heavily contemplated just going home. I don't want to exaggerate and say this is like the worst movie I've ever seen, because it's not. It's not even the worst movie of the year, not even close. That honor still goes to Borderlands movie. It's also not the worst sequel ever made, but it is probably the most disappointing sequel I've seen. It just doesn't have a point. And these musical numbers just feel like bloat to try and take your attention away from how weak the story is. This isn't really a Joker movie, it's more of like a Harley Quinn origin story, which would have been fine if it was good. It's just not. It also feels like Todd Phillips has regrets and isn't proud of the first movie, because a lot of what happens in this movie is undoing a lot of what the first one did. So the Joker's not even really in this movie. I'm just going to tell you right now, it's mainly Arthur Fleck just being sad. Like Arthur Fleck going through bad things. He is completely regressed into just the old Arthur Fleck, who doesn't have that Joker persona anymore and that like confidence or anything. But I do want to be clear, I still think Joaquin Phoenix does an incredible job with this character. I just think the writing around him was significantly weaker on this rodeo. Lady Gaga, I also think does a really good job as Harley Quinn, but it's just really frustrating how it feels like they just ham-fisted musical numbers in here because Lady Gaga is such a good singer. So pretty much every scene she's in, she's singing. Like, I don't think she really got a chance to shine and show, like, her acting prowess, and I think she's a great actress. Instead, she just is forced to just sing every time she's on screen. So I think that just takes away from the character as well. But anyway, the Joker is not really a character in this movie. Even when he's in the makeup and trying to puff out his chest and put on the act of being the Joker, it is unrecognizable from how it was in the first movie. It feels so forced, and in this movie, the Joker's just kind of a fucking moron. Like, he's actually just kind of an idiot. So, a big component of this is him going to trial. And you've seen the trailers, I'm sure. He ends up representing himself. And I thought that was going to be the turning point where most of the movie had been back and forth on Arthur and Joker. Harley is obsessed with Joker, not Arthur. She doesn't care about Arthur that much. It's the Joker that she loves. And when that happens and he fires his lawyer in the middle of the courtroom, I thought it was going to be like, oh, he's going to go into that Joker we saw at the end of the first movie. He doesn't. And really, the entire courtroom drama section of this movie, which is a huge piece of it, is just so flat. Because it's a complete steamroll. Like, we saw everything that happened in the first Joker movie, but a good chunk of this trial is them just telling you what all of us already saw from the first movie. So it just becomes kind of wasteful. The only good moment of the trial is when Gary takes the stand. That back and forth between Gary and the Joker is by far the best part of this whole movie. And it doesn't last that long. Everything else in the courtroom is just really underwhelming. There's nothing the Joker or Arthur or his team can really do to get him out of that situation, so you're just seeing him get fucking slapped by the consequences of his actions, which could have been fine. Like, I think that's a fine narrative point to go down, but there needed to be something in there to make it worth watching, because basically what we're getting is like a lore dump, a recap of what we've already seen. And even when Arthur tries to slip into the Joker in the courtroom, it just doesn't work, in my opinion. Like, he doesn't make any arguments. He doesn't even, like, try and defend himself or make some kind of statement or anything at all. He just talks in a circle, ineffectively. And then he imagines himself killing some people, but that's it. Like, it just doesn't work. I didn't think it worked at all when he tried to be the Joker here. Especially when you consider that a good chunk of this film is dedicated to try and get the audience to buy into the idea that Arthur and the Joker are separate, like it's a split personality. Like, that's his defense's argument that they try and make to help him out in court. And they really try and make you buy into that idea. They even have like an animation that plays at the beginning of the movie, and that video is supposed to try and, like, I don't know, kind of push you down that thought process. But that is so stupid. That doesn't work at all because you've seen the first movie. Like, you've already seen the first movie. Why are we even trying that? It wasn't executed very well. Like, that whole idea of trying to separate these two, it just doesn't work. It's pretty poorly done. I will say the thing that I thought had the most promise was Harley Quinn. Since a lot of this is basically her origin story, they did set up some interesting ideas. Like how she's kind of just manipulating the Joker. Like, she lies to him a lot in order to get close to him and kind of goad him in certain directions, because that's what she fell in love with, was the Joker and, like, the idea of the Joker. So she's constantly, like, manipulating him, and I think could have been an interesting dynamic if it wasn't always just in sing-song fashion, and if it wasn't always just, like, hammered home what she's doing towards the end. And the ending of this movie super sucks. The ending of this movie is, like, actually atrocious. So the courtroom drama is starting to wrap up. He's clearly not winning. He eventually then goes to the jury and starts talking about how, you know, the Joker's not real. It was never real. It's always been Arthur. Which is like that big moment, like, oh, he's been faking it this whole time. There is no, like, second, you know, personality or anything. The Joker's, it's a complete fucking ruse. It's a sham. It's always just Arthur. And while this is going on, a bomb goes off at the courthouse. That's that came out of nowhere. This whole movie doesn't have any, like, action per se. There's a couple things that happen in a fantasy where, like, the Joker gets shot or the Joker hits the judge with a gavel. Like, that all happens in a fantasy, but in the actual reality of the film, nothing like that happens at all. So this bomb explosion comes out of fucking nowhere, like a jump scare. So bomb blows up in the courthouse. Joker escapes. He just walks right out, and he's going to Harley, who doesn't really want to see him, because after what Joker said about the Joker's not real, it's only Arthur, she storms out of the courtroom. And she doesn't return his call. He starts fucking singing to her over voicemail for the millionth time, just another goddamn song, and she ignores it. He leaves the courthouse. He gets picked up by some, like, Joker super fans who get him, put him in the car, and then he runs away from them to try and find Harley. Before he gets out of their car, though, there's statements made by the two people in Joker makeup about how, like, the whole city's gonna burn, this and that. And it seems like Arthur Fleck has like regret and doesn't agree with that. He gets out of the car and starts running. And I think that moment, and he's also getting chased by the Joker's like, we still love you, we love you, Joker. I think that's a moment that's supposed to be, it's very on the nose, supposed to be for the audience to be like, oh, people are relating to the most extreme, unhinged parts of the Joker and using it as a platform for violence type thing. And Arthur is running away from that, trying to find Harley to start a life of love with her. When he finally finds her on the iconic staircase, she wants nothing to do with him. She tells him that it's all just a fantasy. It's always been the Joker that she loves, not Arthur, and he threw away that fantasy, so the Joker's not real. It's only Arthur, and she leaves. It's all just a fantasy. Get the fuck out of here, Buster. Then he gets taken back into jail, thrown back in Arkham, and then he gets told he has a visitor, walks down a hallway, and this random dude who we'd only seen a couple of glimpses of throughout the movie, like looking on like menacingly throughout the film occasionally, talks to him in the hallway asking if he can tell him a joke. And he's like, all right, yeah, if it's a quick joke. And he's like, yeah, I'll make it quick. And the joke basically just ends with him saying, gets what he deserves, and then shanks him like 5 or 6 times, and the Joker dies. Arthur Fleck collapses and dies. And in the background, it's blurred to make it really mysterious and very cinematic. The guy who stabbed him, this random fucking psychopath, is now cutting his face in the shape of a smile. And it's, I believe, alluding to Heath Ledger's Joker, who had the scars in the shape of a smile. And if that is the case, I am pretty sure that's what it's trying to do there. If that is what it's actually aiming for, that is just insultingly shit. That, it doesn't fit at all. Like, you can start picking apart, like, the timeline till the cows come home, but even the context of this film, it just doesn't fucking fit at all. It is a terrible conclusion. Even setting aside the absurdity of this alluding to Heath Ledger's Joker, how this psychopath is now going to take on the mantle of the Joker and be what we saw in The Dark Knight, even setting aside the lunacy of that, this movie actually just goes nowhere. It ends in the exact same place it started without really much changing, and he just dies in a hallway to a random guy. There is no comeuppance for some bad people in this film. For example, the guards. Towards the end of the movie, there is a scene where the guards snap on Arthur after seeing him in the courtroom. They assault him, brutalize him, and there is an implied rape of Arthur by the guards. And the guards just kind of tip their hat to him at the end. That's it. They don't get any like punishment for that or anything, which just, that's not a satisfying conclusion. Arthur is a bad guy. The Joker is a villain. But I don't think, like, it's necessarily the right call to have other villains beat him up, rape him, and those villains are fine at the end of the movie. Like, there should have been a moment where the Joker comes out and he kills those guards for that, or something to that effect. Like, it's just, this movie, it really feels like Todd Phillips hated the character he made, so wanted to unmake the character, like, as best he could. It's just so weird, the direction this movie goes. And beforehand, I know Todd tried to say that he believed music was like an integral part to exploring Arthur as like the complex character. I'm calling baloney on that. That's some fiddlesticks. No shot, because the music doesn't really explore him. The music doesn't really explore anything. It feels like it's here because Lady Gaga is here, and she's so good at singing. The music, like I said, only sometimes even connects to what we're even seeing in the plot. Other times it's just totally isolated. Like, yes, it is a look inside of Arthur's psyche occasionally, but it doesn't contribute anything. It doesn't help with the understanding of the character or how Arthur sees himself, really, outside of like a couple of isolated instances of these sequences. Otherwise, they're just musicals for the sake of it. And it just feels worthless. It's just so odd to take it in that direction. What I truly believed happened here is Todd Phillips made a great movie with the Joker one. That movie was incredible. I liked it a lot. Most people liked it a lot. It's a very well done film. And that movie made significantly more money than Todd and the executives were expecting. So he got that call, offered a big check, and said, fuck it. Fine. I'll phone in a sequel. And he did. But instead of just doing what most people do for an uninspired sequel where they kind of just repeat what the first one did a little worse for the second, He took it in the most unconventional route ever just to be quirky. Like, he took it in this completely different direction and did it terribly. Again, it's not like the worst movie I've ever seen. It's not even the worst sequel I've ever seen, but it is the most confusing one because there's no reason for it to exist. A, it's there just because money, a lot of money from the first one. We need the second one to hopefully get even more money from those piggy banks. And B, why in the fuck does it seem to have such a grudge against the first movie? Like I said multiple times now, it actually just feels like they took that character and broke it. Like, actually just like completely shat on what they built up for this character in the first movie. Instead of expanding on it, growing it, or even exploring it in a different way, they just redid it and wiped their ass with most of what they tried to establish in the first. It just doesn't make sense. And even when it has like an interesting idea or two, like there were a couple moments in this film where I was like, oh, this is building up to something that could be cool. And then it goes to an unrelated musical number, kills its own momentum, comes back, and it's in a totally different spot. The movie's just choppy. Like, it is just choppy. So even when they have something that's starting to develop, it ruins it with a musical and then never comes back to that momentum it was building. So like, it just doesn't work very well. There's a couple of things to like about it, like with the performances of some of the actors here for sure. There are some very cool visual moments. Like I said, in the courtroom with Gary and Arthur, that is a very strong scene. Like, that whole sequence is very powerful. But outside of like these very rare instances of this film, there's just not a whole lot to like. So yeah, I don't really give number reviews to things anymore. I always just answer the question, is it worth watching? And for Folie, Deux, Joker 2, no. I don't think it's worth watching. It actually just feels like a waste of time. It feels like this is a film that has no reason to exist. It never wanted to exist, but had to because of money. So I don't think it's worth watching, and that's disappointing. It's really about it. So, yeah. Joker 2 is a bad movie. I'd even go as far as saying it's a horrible film. But I didn't expect it to flop nearly as hard as it currently is. This is pathetic, the numbers it's putting up in the box office right now. This is the Concorde of movies. The studio stands to lose roughly $150 million based on the estimates right now if the projections keep being followed. It is disastrous. I thought no matter how terrible this film was, it would still do well in the box office because it had such a large fan base that I thought would go see it no matter what, just to give it a chance. Nope. That wasn't the case at all. If you needed to escape from authorities and needed a place to lay low, buy a ticket to Joker 2. No one would ever check that auditorium. No one is going there. Those theaters are more empty than the room Squidward goes to be all alone in the void. It's bad. Also, I make that reference with Squidward a lot. That's just something that's always in my noodle. That's probably still one of my favorite scenes in SpongeBob. But anyway, right now, Joker 2 has opened to a $37.8 million box office domestically, which is actually lower than Morbius. What great company to have right there. It has done worse than Morbius so far. Now, globally, Joker 2 has brought in about $114 million, which isn't the smash success they were expecting it to be. That number sounds very high, but with the amount of money they put into it, it's still not doing well at all. And in the domestic box office, it's horrific. They're starting to realize Joker 2 isn't a tragedy, it's a fucking comedy. Everyone is pointing and laughing at this thing. It super sucks. But not only that, Joker 2, Folie, Deux, PU, this is the poop that just keeps on stinking. Because not only is its box office performance lackluster, it has the lowest cinema score out of any comic book movie ever, at a D. Now, I'm not going to sit here and blow smoke up your butthole pretending that I know everything there is to know about cinema score. This is actually really like one of the few times I've heard of it, so I'm not the most familiar with it, but it's been around for a while and it is a consistent score that pulls moviegoers after seeing a movie just to kind of gauge reactions, and then they assign a grade to it. And prior to Joker 2, the record holder for lowest cinema score for a comic book movie was Fantastic Four from 2015, which had a C-. That movie is still, to date, one of the most hated comic book movies of all time. And now Joker 2 is below that. That's mind-boggling. And they also put it in another perspective here. Borderlands, which I believe is the worst movie of this year, by far, I think it is significantly worse than Joker 2, actually has a D+, meaning that it has a higher score than Joker 2. And Madam Web, which I believe is one of the worst comic book movies of all time, has a C+, so significantly higher than Joker 2. Initially, I just assumed that all cinema scores would skew on the very low side of things, because when people go see a movie that's bad, like a Madam Web, like a Fantastic Four, like a Joker 2, their initial reaction is obviously going to be anger, like, I wasted money on this is absolute dog shit, thus the cinema scores would always be low. But when I saw Madam Web had a C+, I realized that just wasn't really the case. There are people that go see these objectively dog shit films, and they just have dog shit taste that aligns with it, so they liked it. So Madam Web having a C+, it's not always just going to be the most outraged of people every time. Joker 2 is so universally hated by critics and audience alike that even just gauging moviegoers' experiences, you're getting mostly negative without very many positives. So this movie failed on everything it tried to do. I think one of the main contributing factors for everyone's disgust with the film is how a lot of people went into this not even knowing it was a musical. I knew that going into it because it had been talked about prior, but if you only went in based on the trailers and based on how much you liked the first one, you would be caught completely off guard by this being a fucking musical. The trailers try their best to hide that. There's little hints that there might be some kind of music scene, but there is nothing in the trailers that would have you going into this thinking that you're getting a full-blown fucking Red Alert musical. So a lot of people felt really misled by that, and I imagine that contributed heavily to how much they hated it. Now, I don't agree that Joker 2 Folie Deux is the worst comic book movie ever. I think that is an absurd claim. There are significantly worse comic book movies, and it is definitely not worse than Borderlands, but I do agree that Joker 2 is the most disappointing movie, most disappointing comic book movie. It is shocking how you'd follow up a movie that was so well regarded, Joker, with this sequel that seemed to really hate the first film. This movie kind of went out on this vendetta to try and undo everything of the first film, and it just sucks. And even if it didn't have that grudge against the first movie and its success, this film on its own two legs is also trash. It's a terrible plot. It's a really messy clusterfuck of a narrative. Nothing really works here. The movie ends in the exact same spot that it begins, with pretty much nothing changing and an abrupt death. It is the least satisfying film ever that has nothing redeeming about it, really, aside from some good performances. And I guess if you really like musicals, there's a couple of songs in there that are just good songs, but even the musicals are lackluster because they don't really tie into the story. It's just unsuccessful with everything that it did, and it did not do much in the first place. I was talking with a buddy of mine about how shit Joker 2 was, and we were just kind of spitballing what made it so bad and how it even got to that point. And then later he sent me this post from Culture Crave that kind of gives bullet points on how this catastrophe came into existence. So I've heard some of these, but some of them were brand new information. So apparently the idea came to Joaquin Phoenix in a dream. And there's multiple sources that corroborate that little nugget of lunacy. It turns out that it was Phoenix who came up with the idea for the sequel, which came to him in a dream. And he and Phillips brought this idea to former Warner Bros. Chairman Toby Emmerich, according to sources. After one insider was asked who the movie was made for, they responded with two words: for Joaquin. That is so silly. I hear that a lot, actually, though. That's a pretty common cliche where if people are asked about something like, how did this come to be? Some people will default to just making up some pretentious nonsense like, oh, it came to me in a dream, actually. I doubt it. I really doubt that. But let's just assume in this case it's real. Joaquin Phoenix had a dream about Joker 2 being a musical. Just keep that a dream, buddy. That's a stupid idea. That's not even something worthy of taking to anyone. That's embarrassing. And what's even more embarrassing is how up his own ass Todd Phillips is that he thought that was a great decision, and he thought he knew better than everyone else, so he shunned the rest of the department to do his own thing, because he knew better. He had the billion-dollar blockbuster mega-hit Joker. He can do no wrong. So he ran with this stupid idea that came to Phoenix in a dream. They also apparently tossed around another stupid idea about putting it on Broadway before making it into a film, though I guess admittedly it would have been better on Broadway than in a movie setting, because at least then they could try and make the musicals work and weave it more into the actual plot. But unfortunately we were cursed with this film. Todd Phillips had free reign with Warner Bros. Wanting him to do his thing, and the film had no test screenings. Because why would you test screen this? Todd Phillips knows what you like. Clearly, he's in your fucking walls. He is in your noodle reading your mind. He's delivering that fire that you've been looking for with Joker sequel. Lady Gaga signed on before the script was finished. That one I don't think is that big of a deal. She is a talented actress, so if she signed on because she was excited for the script even though it wasn't done, I don't think it's that surprising or that big of an issue, but I do imagine she might have some regret with agreeing to do this before seeing the final script, because this has become a joke. Next, the new DC boss, James Gunn, had zero involvement, gave notes, but Todd Phillips didn't use them. Used them for toilet paper, I'm sure. I mean, why would you try and give notes to Todd Phillips? I mean, he's got no blemishes on his resume. He knows how to handle a sequel. What could you possibly have notes on for Joker Folie? It's a fucking masterpiece, clearly. God, I don't know a whole lot about Todd Phillips other than his previous work, but his attitude for this movie is so yucky. It's so embarrassing just reading about him. The film had a budget of $200 million, which included a $20 million salary for Phoenix, $12 million for Lady Gaga. Not surprising, almost every blockbuster that comes out is in like the $100-200 million plus ballpark. I imagine this film in the marketing budget alone adds an additional $200 million to that figure. Musical aspects were largely downplayed in marketing, with director Todd Phillips at first insisting it wasn't one. I don't remember Todd Phillips trying to shut that down or anything, put the kibosh on it. For as long as I can remember, the film, since its official announcement, had always had that knowledge revealed that there was a lot of musical elements to it. So I went in with the impression that this was going to be a musical, and I imagine a lot of others did as well. But again, if you just watch the trailers, it doesn't really come across that way. So perhaps Todd Phillips made that conscious decision to hide that fact, because musicals, I mean, especially for fans of the first Joker movie, probably aren't going to be that enticing for this kind of audience. So I imagine that's probably accurate, but I don't recall Todd Phillips trying to downplay it. Christopher Nolan reportedly changed the ending of the first movie because it ended with Phoenix's Joker carving a smile. There was no resistance for the sequel, with Nolan leaving Warner Bros. That was fascinating to me. So apparently, Todd Phillips had actually wanted in the first film him to cut the smile into his face. Christopher Nolan was apparently still with Warner Bros. At the time, so he had say-so here and said, "You're a fucking idiot." No, he shut that shit down real quick. But now that Nolan left Warner Bros., Todd Phillips was left to his own devices again and went hog wild, so as all of you know by now, the Joker 2 ends with a completely random psychopath who shanks Joaquin Phoenix's Joker in the hallway where the movie begins, because nothing in this film fucking changes and nothing actually matters in the movie. This random guy abruptly kills him, and then in the background cuts a smile into his face. Just Todd Phillips paying a little disrespect to Nolan here, and the legacy that Nolan built with that Joker. It's such an insulting thing to conclude here, because it's not well done. It comes out of nowhere, and this whole film is garbage in the first place, so it's just an even bigger waste of time. I understand why Nolan would absolutely not want Phillips to do that. It's also just highly unnecessary and doesn't actually tie into anything, so it's super dumb, but since Nolan wasn't at Warner Bros. At the time, Todd Phillips unfortunately got to do it, and we're all worse off for it. This next one had me giggling. Todd Phillips was secluded on a ranch during the opening weekend. I think he was bracing for the storm. I think he knew that this was not going to be received well. It was already not being highly reviewed from the people that had already seen it. So I imagine he had the inkling that, man, maybe he missed the mark. Or I could be totally wrong. Perhaps this is Todd Phillips just under the impression that his high art speaks for itself, and he wants people to come up with their own conclusions based on the nothing burger he served them. So he isolated himself from the rest of society to give us this chance. But more than likely, he just went to the ranch to just go ahead and tune everything out and count all the money Warner Bros. Dumped on his fucking front porch for this absolutely trash sequel. Film was panned by fans and critics. It currently has a 33% from Rotten Tomatoes critics and a 31% audience score. It has the cinema score of D, lowest ever for a comic book film. Domestically opened with 37.8 million, which is lower than comic book films like Morbius and the Marvels, and it needs 450 million globally to break even, which may lose the studio over 150 million, and Warner Bros. Discovery is already in $40 billion of debt. And god damn it, they earned every penny of that debt. Warner Bros. Keeps making the stupidest decisions. I am always surprised to see what new batshit insane idea fucking Zaslav comes up with. Like, every move he makes, he's like the opposite of King Midas, where King Midas would turn things to gold. Zaslav comes around with a cheese touch. He turns everything to actual poop. He is just, I don't know how he even got this position. He is bad at his job. So Warner Bros. Is deep in debt. This is not helping at all. And I just had to talk about it again. You know, Joker 2 is all about musicals and dancing, so you know what, I'll give you one of these. I'll dance on the grave of Joker 2. What a fucking disaster. And it earned it too, man. The movie is bad, the decision making was bad with it, and Warner Bros. Really needs to figure it out, because it is getting embarrassing for that whole company. That's about it. See ya. I just saw Megalopolis. Wow. It was like embarrassing sitting there watching that. I actually felt shame just being there witnessing that disaster of a movie. And to make it worse, insult to injury, I watched it right after Joker 2. So I just made the review for Joker 2. Spoiler, that movie was also bad. This movie was worse for sure, but man, what an unholy 1-2 combo that was. This was like a punch flurry that not even Mike Tyson could deliver, going back to back with Joker and then Megalopolis. So I took a shower before talking about Megalopolis because I know I'm going to get heated on this because it's just so weird. This movie had over $100 million budget. And I don't get why. I don't get it. I already made like a whole rant about that with like these inflated budgets, but this film in particular it's so stupid to have a budget that big because it's a movie devoid of a single element of a story. It has things that happen, sure, but it is such a fucking mess. This is a movie that smells of pretentiousness. It's very clear this wanted to be deeper than it is. This is a movie that wasn't made for any audience in particular. It was made for critics. It was made for people that love the smell of their own farts to pretend like they understand the subtle vicissitudes that the director was trying to convey. But in this film, it doesn't even work with that niche. Because even critics don't like it. It's just not very good. Like, at all. It is a disjointed, like, actual fever dream experience. So, let's just dive into it. There's going to be spoilers. Fair warning. This is a movie that I feel like it's almost impossible to spoil because there isn't really a movie here. It's a collection of random shit that happens. It's like a collection of Francis Ford Coppola's memories from dreams that he had that he tries to piece together loosely here. Very similar to like how the Rick and Morty anime does it. Like, this is the Rick and Morty anime with a $100 million budget. I'm also pretty sure every actor in here was just directed to be as weird as they possibly can. So Shia LaBeouf, for example, he's in this movie and he dials his like wackiness up to 11. So like in the very beginning of the movie, they're like going to this big press thing about something that they're opening, and Shia LaBeouf's there, and his uncle is also Caesar's uncle, and he's like, I heard you're doing the hanky pank with your sisters. Can you stop that? And Shia LaBeouf's like, no, I won't stop that. So he's like doing this, and then he like grabs the railing and he like kicks his feet up. He goes, and then he like puts himself in a dress in the next scene, like also still doing those mannerisms and stuff. And also, Adam Driver as Caesar, someone I thought was supposed to be like this cavalier, like genius guy, he's kind of the same way. So at that same press event, he's there and he's giving a monologue, and he is actually a Reddit mod. So Caesar's character, I am 100% sure, is inspired by like the quintessential Reddit mod that everybody pictures in their head. The way he carries himself, the way he talks, he's always some of this. And like the way he speaks to people is so fucking cringe. Like actual Discord admin level shit. So like there's a scene where the mayor's daughter shows up and he talks to her. He's like, Jiminy Christmas. He doesn't say Jiminy Christmas. But he scoffs. He's like, ugh, you, of course, you've wandered into my quarters. I'd prefer if you weren't here. I don't like to dawdle with the riffraff. I prefer to carry myself in conversations with those that like to think, so we can have intellectual discussions on important subjects. So if you wouldn't mind excusing yourself from my abode, I would be much appreciative of that. Why don't you go see yourself back to the club and get out? And he says that, by the way. That wasn't verbatim, but he literally says club like that. It's awful. It's terrible to listen to. But I will say, it is fun bad pretty often, actually. I did find myself audibly saying, what the fuck, with a smile on my face and giggling occasionally at how horrible what I was watching is. Because it's really shitty, but sometimes in an unintentionally entertaining way. It tries to be so profound and falls flat on its fucking face. So let's begin. I don't think the movie is dog shit out of the gate. In fact, I actually quite like the visuals in this film. Like, the style of it, I think, is interesting. But by the time it gets to the halfway point, you're already so lost in the sauce here that you have no clue what's happening. So it all just becomes kind of worthless anyway. But I do think there is a style here that is unique. However, the visuals really are hit or miss. There are times where it looks really good. Like, it seems like, hey, this is a big budget production. And then there's times where it actually looks like they filmed it at our warehouse in front of our green screen. Like, there are some of the worst green screen moments in here that I've seen in a modern film. Like, it makes some of DC's biggest stinkers for CGI look like award winners. I don't know what happened and why there's some incredible visuals here and then some absolute, like, Adobe After Effects first year attempt, like, visuals. I don't get it. So something definitely went awry in the pipeline here for the production, but overall, I do think the style is eye-catching. Now, the beginning of the film isn't super dog shit. It's not like Turbo Cheeks or anything. It actually is almost cohesive. They introduce our two main characters that we're going to be seeing a lot of. It's Adam Driver playing Caesar, who is like this genius architect who's found like the god particle basically called Megalon. And it's Giancarlo Esposito playing Cicero, who is the mayor, who does not like Caesar. They butt heads constantly. And the film, like, it's not like it's a mess because I'm too stupid to understand it. I know that's a lot of cope people like to try in a film like this, where they like stick their pinky out. The plebeians just simply couldn't understand this high art. What a shame. I understand it because I'm enlightened. That's not the case here. I actually think this movie is very easy to understand on the themes it's trying to get across in the beginning, where it actually had a semblance of a narrative. In the second half of the film, there's nothing. There's actually nothing. We'll get to that in a minute. It is a fucking battlefield of nonsense. But in the beginning, I think it's pretty clear. It's introducing characters that have different ideologies. So, like, there's a reporter who keeps fucking her way up the ladder, trying to get more and more power, more and more wealth. She has, like, a fling with Caesar. Caesar's somewhat of, like a playboy to a certain extent. He's, like, this genius, cavalier kind of guy. Cicero is really against what Caesar represents, which is change. He is trying to think about the future, whereas Cicero's focused on the present. And that's the big clash of ideals. So this is very clearly inspired by, like, the fall of Rome. They drill that home. They shove that down your fucking throat. Like, the location here is called New Rome. It's basically just New York, though. So the whole idea is the dreamer, the architect here, Caesar, wants to bring change. But the rich and powerful around him, they're pretty okay being stagnant and focusing more on, like, the present and just keeping people, like, occupied as opposed to getting ready for what comes next. Caesar has an uncle who's, like, the richest person in the fucking universe. His name's Hamilton, and he's beyond absurdly wealthy. So Caesar also has a lot of power, a lot of money, a lot of influence. And the whole idea is he wants to use the Megalon particle to make Megalopolis, which will be a utopia, which is all about the future and getting the next generation ready for what comes. And also, Caesar has a superpower. He can stop time. Not only can he stop time, he can fully manipulate it. He controls time. And you'd think that'd be like an important component of this story. It's not. He does it maybe 3 times. And he really only does it when he wants to watch a building fall once. And then the other 2 times he does it is to kiss a girl. Oh, and then he does it one more time where he just shows that he can do it. He never actually uses it for anything. It is completely worthless, meaningless. I don't even know why they bothered giving him a superpower, other than what it represents. So here's where we get to, again, the double meanings and shit that like to try and get woven in here unsuccessfully because the film's just very underwhelming. The idea, I believe, that they're trying to convey with Caesar stopping time is one that they do kind of like hammer into you at one point, because his love interest comes in after he's lost this power due to self-doubt. She kind of explains that art, every piece of art, uses time, manipulates time, controls time. Music turns time into rhythm. Architecture freezes time in these buildings, this and that. So the idea here with his superpower isn't necessarily that he's has the ability to control time, even though he literally does. It's more about the representation that his vision, his art, is the architecture and the ability to stop time with his creation. Now, his love interest, the reason she even gets interested in him in the first place is she happens to see him stop time. She doesn't get stopped. Everyone else around him gets frozen in time. She doesn't. She's able to like process it and like, wow, he can control time. Most people will be really impressed by that. And the idea here that they're trying to get across, I believe, is that she can see his artistic vision, and he is able to understand that she gets the vision, which is why he falls in love with her and her him. And this all would be fine and dandy if there was anything that comes from it. Like, they set up this shit, it's not that subtle, it's not very deep, it's all kind of like obvious, I think, for the most part, and they don't even do anything with it. It's just like a bunch of different fucking ideas that don't work together that get thrown in here. It's a waste of time. And it introduces so many plot elements that never play a role in this. So like the superpower, for example, it doesn't actually play a role in this at all. There's also a satellite that they introduce in the beginning that's about to like fall into the earth and maybe be a problem, but then they deem it's not that big of a deal because it's hitting somewhere kind of remote. And then eventually towards the end of the movie, here comes the satellite. It's changed course. It's going to hit New Rome directly. No! And then it hits New Rome, blows up like 3 buildings, and then it's never addressed again. Like, and then also there's a plot line where Caesar's wife died, and for some reason he was accused of murdering her. And Cicero, the mayor, was actually the DA at the time trying to pin murder on him. He was eventually acquitted of that. And then there's like this scene where he's buying flowers for his wife, except his wife's dead, so it's like kind of all in his head, but it shows like he still loved his wife. And I thought that was going to be a big component of this, but it's not. Turns out like he wasn't the best husband really, and his wife ended up like driving off a bridge and dying, and then something mysteriously happened to the body, and they accuse Caesar of like taking the body, except he didn't take the body. It was actually some kind of big cover-up. And then Cicero, when he finds out that Caesar's like, you know, impregnated his daughter, he's like, listen, Caesar, I love my daughter, and here's a red envelope that has my confession about your wife's body, which is never addressed again. Also, his wife's body never mattered in the plot. Also, his wife never mattered in the plot. The biggest thing that happened with his wife is where he like really offhandedly mentions that he found Megalon by trying to bring his wife back to life, and then that's it. Then he goes right back to making out and impregnating the mayor's daughter. All of these things get introduced, but don't actually mean anything or do anything. Like, there's a whole scene where the reporter that was fucking Caesar ends up marrying his uncle for his money, and they throw this big wedding at a coliseum where they have like wrestlers wrestling, and then they have this girl do a musical number, and she's like the virgin that New Rome sponsors. Like, she's a New Rome enforced virgin. So during this wedding celebration, there's a moment where she has a musical number, and then it leads to people like donating money for her virginity fund or something. Like, I don't even know what they're bidding on. Like, they start bidding. It gets up to like $100 million just to give her money for being a virgin. Like, it makes no sense. And then all of a sudden, Shia LaBeouf's in this movie, acting like an absolute crazy person, which is fine, I guess, but it doesn't do anything. He's just like weird for the sake of being weird. It doesn't actually do anything for the plot. But anyway, Shia LaBeouf comes up with this nefarious plot to try and like hurt Caesar, so he deep fakes a video of him taking that girl's virginity, except she was underage. So then he starts to like get tried for like statutory rape, except then it turns out that the girl's 23, and then like the charges immediately get dropped. And then the whole thing with that girl, Caesar, the virgin, whatever, none of that ever gets addressed outside of the 10 minutes that became a plot point. It's like Francis Ford Coppola completely forgot it was even written in here. Like, it's just this complete nonsensical fucking dumpster fire of things that happen. And I can't even say happen, because a lot of things don't even really happen. Like, almost nothing happens. It is impossible to piece together what the actual plot is past the halfway point. And I'd say a little before the halfway point, it goes completely unhinged and off the rails. It falls apart, and it was barely even held together in the first place. But at least there was a semblance of where things were going. But then it just becomes indecipherable. It's like Finnegan's Wake visually. Just complete gibberish. So, like, the plot's moving forward. Eventually, like, Shia LaBeouf's character, Claudio, he starts leading a movement that's, trying to push Caesar out, push the mayor out. He's leading the charge and like, getting into politics. Things aren't going super well for Caesar, who gets shot by a child as like an assassination attempt that Claudio was behind, but he survives because Megalon got fused with his skull, which regrew his whole brain and his whole face. So like it's literally a god particle. It's like a magic particle that can just do anything, including building a utopia. The girl who married the uncle then starts having sex with Claudio. So like there's this whole uncomfortable scene. The girl is played by Aubrey Plaza, by the way. And so Aubrey Plaza goes up to Shia LaBeouf and she's like, "Your grandfather, we need to steal his money. You're a naughty boy, aren't you?" And he's like, "Yes, Auntie Wow." Her name is Wow Platinum. That's the character's name, Wow Platinum. And this scene goes on for way too long, an uncomfortably long period of time, where she's like, "Does my ass look good in this?" And he's like, "Yeah." And she said, "No, yes, Auntie Wow. Say that." And he's like, "Yes, Auntie Wow." And then she like shoves her whole pussy in his face, and he starts eating her out, saying, "Thanks, Auntie Wow." And then she's like, "Do you want to fuck me?" And he's like, "Yes, Auntie Wow." And then she goes over her plan to get Claudio to become the interim CEO to force out Hamilton so they can have all of his infinite wealth. So then they're together, and then they do execute that plan, and it kicks Hamilton out somehow. And then Hamilton has a heart attack, except he's faking it, so he's like in bed, and Claudio and Wow Platinum pay him a visit. And a lot of people, I think, talked about this scene because someone mentioned it on stream like 2 days ago. So this is the scene where Hamilton's in bed and they're around him, and he's still pretending to be like injured to a certain extent from the heart attack. So he says, "One more thing. Do you like my boner?" Because there's like something sticking up in the sheets. And like, "Do you like my boner?" And then he takes the sheet off, and it's a little bow and arrow, like Cupid's bow and arrow. So he shoots a little arrow, which hits Aubrey Plaza in the heart, instantly killing Wow Platinum. And then he shoots 2 more arrows into the ass of Shia LaBeouf as he runs away. And he says, "It's the closing bell, you Wall Street slut." Something like that before firing the arrow, killing Aubrey Plaza. It's bad. Like, it's bad, but like I said, that's kind of like fun shitty. Do you like my boner? Like, I mean, it got a little laugh out of me, the absurdity of it. Maybe that's the whole point of the movie, is just to be so incomprehensibly absurd that you're supposed to find enjoyment of it. But you're not really laughing with the movie, you're kind of laughing at it. Because it's a disaster. This movie is a disaster. So, like, even Megalopolis itself, what it is, like the utopia that Caesar is building, it's a fucking amusement park. He is literally making an amusement park. So you see Megalopolis at the end, like, he gets it made and everyone moves to Megalopolis, and somehow it's supposed to save the world, and somehow the mayor, who's been really adamant against it, thinking that Caesar's like this evil bad guy, this can never work, whatever, he ends up going there and he's like, "Wow, this place is fucking incredible. Wow, look at that. Yeah, this is going to save the world. But shake my hand and tell me that you're going to build diligently," or something. He's like, "Yeah, of course." And the place is actually like little roller coasters. So you ride around on Pokeballs on these golden highways. Oh, actually, they're kind of like the little pods out of Jurassic World. You ride around on those in little golden highways, like tiny little highways, and all of the buildings are like seashells. It actually kind of reminds me of the concept art for Akon City. You remember that like scam Akon tried to run? It actually kind of looks like that. I think they took design elements from Akon City for Megalopolis. It's so silly. Like, somehow this is the utopia? This is what saves the world? Like, what? It was so dumb. Man, I could go on and on about, like, the insanity of this film. I just can't believe this got made, and I am even more stunned that this had over a $100 million budget. What a waste of money. So, I know it's not doing well financially, so everyone's already made the joke calling it Megaflopolis, but man, it really is. This shit sucks. Like, I don't get it, what they were going for. Like, I get in the beginning what they tried to set up with, like, the pretty obvious imagery and, like, the ideologies that they introduced. Like, I get that, but then it just doesn't even follow any of that. Like, it doesn't even go down that path. It's just a complete mess. So, is Megalopolis worth watching? No. But if you like fun bad movies, this might be one to stream when it comes out. I think it is fun bad. I think it's more oftentimes enjoyably shitty than it is boringly shitty. Like, there was never a moment in the film where I was like, man, this is like unbearable to sit through. I was always like, okay, this is kind of dragging, but I know there's going to be something so stupid that it'll probably like breathe life back into this. And I was usually right. It is fun bad pretty often. So if you like shittily entertaining films, this one might be for you. But I would not recommend paying money to go see it under any circumstance. That's about it. See ya.
As a boy, Josh Carpenter never truly understood the importance of God's word.
Then everything changed during the nuclear explosion. Did somebody insult the Lord? I'm coming in hot.
I'm sending test answers and completed homework assignments to kids everywhere.
What a hero!
The truth.
Fuck you, Bible man.
Besides trying to do
Boo!
what everyone thinks is right. You fail.
I mean, can't you just pass out the test answers when you're not looking? Oh, well, then banish them to the Shadow Realm.
Old saying is true.
You remember when we killed that guy?
Never prosper.
Because you wanted to help kids with their
God's
homework?
Tutor? Here?
Someone's giving out free food.
Activate the
Bible man
security.
says you need to work for your food. No handouts.
You developed it.
And I'd be glad to install it, unless of
A
course
woman
you're familiar
developed
with
man
reverse
Bible
translation.
technology. You hear that, Cypher? A woman made Bible man stuff?
There are not a lot of steps.
That's not in the
if you
Bible.
Don't do it exactly right.
Just rising conflict.
We're on it.
Hey guys,
What?
may the
That
Lord
doesn't-
be with you.
That doesn't necessarily mean it's the
Ready
devil's
to do a
work.
little investigating? Yeah.
That's not a fair
Take
gauge.
me out to the ball game.
We
Unless
detected
you're Jeff,
unusual
I'd like to
levels of
stick
gamer
around for a
energy.
complete diagnostic.
Definitely the work of
No
devil.
objection here.
Cypher, don't be fooled. They're in the trash can.
Professor Snort scoff.
No, don't give up the hunt.
Across town at the Empower
Oh,
Factory.
must have been the
which is
wind.
Also, Professor
It's like a video game NPC.
It's for this town. Of course.
Is this my first Bible Man video? No. When I was young, the original Bible Man run was like the late 90s, and when I was young, my after school program was a really Christian spot, so they'd play a lot of Bible Man.
Isn't it snowing?
The OG Bible Man is much, much, much better.
The full armor of God.
Oh, baby! Training montage. Nope, never mind. Yeah, this is the OG crew. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is the OG Bible Man that looked like a sex offender in disguise.
Looks as though you may have bitten
God,
off
yeah.
way more than you can chew.
Look at the costume. It's... That's what superheroes used to look like in the golden age. Foam
How's the show going?
and paper and really tight spandex so you could see his ball sack. Damn, Wesley's taller than Bible Man. And he's like a 10-year-old kid. Well, he's probably taller than me too, but fuck you, Bible Man. You're short too.
Kids.
Papa squat. No, it's not an erection. It's just the edge of the Bible. I always keep one down
You know,
there.
there have been many times.
Yeah, baby. Oh, yeah. The OG intro. Fuck the new adventures of Bible Man. The new Bible Man's like the Teen Titans Go of Bible verse. Nice melody to slap your girl's ass to. That's a stinky beat. Fuck yeah. This is like North Korean propaganda. I'm being indoctrinated. No! The Bible Man! Shit! He's too strong. Fucking Bible vision.
Encourage you.
I just wanted to come to hear my theme song. You guys didn't fuck it up, did you? If you fucked up the Bible Man theme song, I'm gonna be very upset. Man, he is getting a fat bulge. Why is that? Why are those pants so tight? Oh my god. Holy Lord. Leaves nothing to the imagination. I could see his ball sack bulge and his cock bulge resting on top of it.
When you perform tonight.
Why is the Lord's will to have such tight pants?
Okay. Good luck.
Oh my. Oh my. Can we get that on the Jumbotron? Where's an instant replay of that bulge?
You should let that light.
Let's get a bulge cam in here. Look at that bulge. Bible Man. More like Boner Man. Oh my god. Is that a Bible in your pants, or are you just having a boner? God damn it, Bible Man.
Is too evil.
Hey, whoa, 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 whoa. Bible Man doesn't get hard. It's a holy stiffness. It's like his spidey sense for his dick. He can sense sin with his erection.
Bibleman.
Here's a little number we call Get Low by Bible Man.
I am sorry. We'll
Can you hold these kids? I'm busy. I'm working, as you can see. Man, I don't even know why they bothered designing a costume. All I can look at is his bulge. Bible Man's about to get fucked. The Fiddler's too strong.
nasty character.
It's
too.
Will Ames. He's 5'6". No, he's not. This dude's like 4'7". A literal 9-year-old was taller than him. He's absolutely not 5'6". I could recognize a fellow 5'6" man. That's rough. Yeah, that's rough. You hate to see that. Yikes. God, his moves are nuts!
Don't go well together.
He's like the Doug Marcaida of Christianity. Bible Man's the only man who could have beaten King Arthur in a sword fight. I imagine most of you were living your life in ignorant bliss, not even knowing there was a new Hellboy movie coming out. About 2 months ago, they released a trailer for Hellboy the Crooked Man, and for maybe like 12 hours, people collectively clowned on it, because it looked like trash. Anyway, though, most people forgot all about it. I didn't. I paid attention. About 2 weeks ago, they also announced that they weren't even going to bother throwing this puppy into movie theaters. It was just going straight to streaming, which doesn't showcase a lot of faith in Hellboy the Crooked Man here from the higher-ups. They just condemned it straight to the VHS bin at Blockbuster. I love Hellboy. The Guillermo del Toro movies, I think, are amazing, and I was one of the few delusional souls that found enjoyment out of the Hellboy reboot a few years ago. I recognize that it's an objectively horrible film, but tell that to my heart, which was smiling watching it, because it was so entertainingly shit. Especially the ending. I actually talk about the ending quite a bit on stream. I still think that is one of the most shocking, out of nowhere, but beautiful endings ever. Basically, hell gets opened on Earth, and they have these really cool demon designs that come out that I've never seen on the big screen, and they just start, like, flaying people alive. They start killing people in really fucking gory, creative ways. It was unexpected and really cool to see. But the movie's bad, I know that. It's still fun. But anyway, I paid attention to the Crooked Man here, because I was going to watch it no matter what. And I don't want the title to mislead anyone here. It's not a good movie, but it's not as dog shitty as I was expecting it to be. So clearly this film is working on a lower budget here, which I never mind. Like I said, I think low budget films are the future. Every movie needing $100 million plus budget is absurdity, and some of my favorite films are the ones that are made on shoestring budgets. Even though this budget is like 20 million, I wouldn't even really call that shoestring, but comparatively to like everything else that comes out, that is teeny tiny. That is tiddlywinks of dollars to work with. Godzilla Minus One made it work, though, with a $15 million budget, and that was my favorite movie of 2023. That movie is a fucking masterpiece. Hellboy the Crooked Man is not. I'm not trying to compare it to Godzilla Minus One or anything. I'm just saying the budget, I don't think, is the biggest issue with the film. And I actually think they used their budget pretty well. Stylistically, I think the film looks good. I think they chose a good style to go with, and they recognize shortcomings with like CGI and stuff, so they don't bother to try and show you something that looks shitty for CGI. They will instead, like when someone's transforming, instead of showing them going through it, they'll cut away and they've already transformed. It's better than giving you some kind of lazy Nintendo 64 looking thing of them transforming. That's smart. And they do that for some of the action as well. And action doesn't happen much in this movie at all. This is not the Hellboy I've ever seen before. Apparently this is more true to the comic books, where he's more of a detective as opposed to like a badass fighter. And I don't really like that. I'll just go ahead and tell you right now, I thought it was lame. Hellboy doesn't do much. Like, even as an investigator, he doesn't do much. He just says, "oh crap," a lot. And then at one point he starts hitting a few zombies with a shovel. And he like grabbed the snake once and popped its head after getting bit by it like 8 times. And after getting suplexed by this like normal sized snake like 8 times. So I was really unimpressed with Hellboy's ability to handle himself and take care of situations. It wasn't really Hellboy versus the Crooked Man. It was more like this geriatric old man choking on a fur ball and then Hellboy shooting him. I'm getting into spoilers here, obviously, but it's just kind of underwhelming in that department. Now, if you're like a huge fan of the comic books and prefer a more passive Hellboy, then maybe this is more up your alley. But for me, I'd become accustomed to how he'd been portrayed in the previous films, so I didn't really like this version of him very much. I think the actor did a decent job, though, playing Hellboy. You're never going to live up to Ron Perlman or anything, but I thought he was fine. I really did. And I kind of went off on a tangent here, getting into other things, but what I was talking about with the style is I do think they used their budget well. Like, the locations are small, contained, so it's not like huge scale or anything. And I actually prefer that everything's not on this like world-ending scale. I like this more localized story. Basically, they had this spider that they were transporting. Shit gets cattywampus, the spider breaks free, they fall off of a train, and now they're in the weird hills here that have some spooky stuff going on with some witches and the Crooked Man. So it's very small, like it's contained, and I appreciate that. I do want to mention that even though they, for the most part, do a good job of not just showing you bad CGI, there are moments where there is bad CGI, because, I mean, for a film like this, there is going to be CGI moments, and yikes, sports fans, I gotta tell you, sometimes it does not look good. For example, there is a witch. Since I'm already getting into spoilers, I'm just going to go ahead and tell you who the witch is. I've been getting into spoilers when going over these things, but I'll just keep giving you warnings. This is a huge spoiler for this, so if you plan on watching this movie, just know I'm about to spoil something big for you. Hellboy's mom plays a role in this, and she's a witch. And Hellboy keeps getting transported to the fucking Upside Down, where he's witnessing his mother being like tortured for sins that she has committed, and forced to bear this child, Hellboy. And she is burning. And Hellboy watches her burn, and it looks awful. Like, not like painful or anything, I'm sure it is, but like visually, I thought for a second I wasn't even watching a movie anymore. I was watching like previs. It actually looks like they took the actress and then slapped like fire JPEG images they found on Google and slightly animated it on top of her. It was bad. Again, though, overall, I do feel they did a good job of avoiding like bad CGI moments, and overall, I do think the movie looks good visually. It also goes for a horror approach as opposed to what I would expect from a Hellboy film, which is more like action-oriented and all of that. The film really wants to be unnerving, creepy, spooky. Like, they have the ominous music that you hear in every horror movie ever made. It has very standard horror movie moments. It doesn't really have any jump scares, at least not that I recognized as a jump scare attempt, but it's very clear it wants to be a horror film, at least a large part of it. I do not think it does the horror very well, mainly because it is the most cliche horror that it weaves in here. There's nothing new or exciting about the attempt it makes at making horror moments work. It's all very standard tropes we've seen from every other horror movie ever. But maybe that'll be appealing to some people that would like to see horror integrated with a Hellboy movie. For me, I think that was a miss, though. For me, that wasn't hitting. Like, the first half of the film, we're getting acclimated to this environment with people that understand that witches are around. So, like, Hellboy and his sidekick, her name is Jo. She's like a researcher and like an assistant. She's just here like getting some field work because she's really excited about that and wants like hands-on research. Anyway, they go to this like house that they stumble across. So they go into this house and there's like a boy lying on the floor paralyzed. And Hellboy's like, what's going on with him? And they're like, oh yeah, we've been witched by Cora Fisher. He's cursed by Cora Fisher, a witch, and now he's like that. And Hellboy's like, okay, so are you okay with him being turned into a rug like this? They don't really answer. He's like, I was a witch with Cora Fisher. And then a guy named Tom comes in, and he's fucking omniscient. He, like, knows everything about everything here. So he comes in, and he's got, like, this little ball of poop. And he tosses it to Hellboy, and he calls it a witch ball. He's like, oh, it's a witch ball. And Hellboy's like, damn, don't like witch balls. I guess. No explanation for like what witch balls are, but then it cuts to like this weird scene that I don't understand the purpose of. I wrote it down because I was so stunned by it. So like after this and like a little bit of background on Cora Fisher the witch and her relationship to Tom, it cuts to this part where there's this lady named Granny Oakham. So she's breaking the fourth wall. She's talking to the audience here through the eyes of, like, we're in the eyes of, like, a crow that's there, and she's talking to us, I believe is the idea, and she gives, like, a YouTube tutorial on witch balls. Again, never explaining what they're used for, like, the purpose of witch balls, unless I missed it somewhere, but she's like, Granny Oakham gonna teach you how to make a witch ball right now, so this is what we're gonna do, you're gonna take a rat's tail, you're going to gut a cat, you're going to take the guts, you're going to put the bones of the cat in here, you're going to put it in a pot, boil it, mash it, stick it in a stew, you're going to then trim your hair, take some of your fingernails, and then trim your pubic hair, put it all together, and you got a witch ball. Why would anyone ever want that? Like, what do you use it for? Does it have power? Like, can I use it like a Kamehameha blast? Like, what is the witch ball for? You've taught me how to make it in this cauldron, but it's fundamentally still a shit nugget. What am I doing with it? And what's crazy is it ends up playing a pretty big role at the end of this movie. Well, in general, actually, you keep seeing witch balls. So, like, they end up going to Cora Fisher's place, the witch, and Tom has a personal connection to her. They get there, and they find more witch balls. So she's fucking pooping around like she got, like, rabbit turds, these witch balls. And Tom's like, oh, damn, she's like a full-blown witch. There's, like, bugs and stuff. And then they find her skin suit. She's just got her whole skin lying around like it's about to be a cosplay costume. So, and Tom's like, all right, we just got to leave her there. She's out wandering around. So I was under the impression that she was just wandering around skinless, just like meat. But it turns out she was just transformed into a raccoon. And then she comes back, crawls into the skin suit's mouth, and takes shape again, but very slowly and very painfully. So her body's like breaking and shit, and she's crying out in agony. So I had to wonder, like, why did she even bother transforming if it's this painful? Just don't transform. Just stay in human mode. It seems really stupid to put yourself through that agony. So anyway, though, now they've all teamed up. Tom, Cora, Hellboy, Jo, and turns out Tom had another friend who was a witch, and I already forgot her name. I think her name was Effie. And he's going through like this flashback where he was becoming a witch. They were doing a ritual, and we learn more about the Crooked Man, who was a guy who got killed, and then he came back to collect souls to be rich again, and he gets like a penny every time he collects a soul. So he has like a pocket full of change, collects souls. Tom and Effie were doing this ritual. He saw the Crooked Man that made him want to stop being a witch. But there was a thing Effie said where, with the cat bones he was collecting, make sure to pick out your favorite bone because it's going to be your lucky bone. For some fucking reason. And that is a very powerful object for the rest of this film. This lucky bone that he has. So he went to war, lucky bone kept him alive. He comes back, the lucky bone's basically a magic wand where he can Wingardium Leviosa shit. So he's got the lucky bone, which is really good against Effie, the witch who is still around and evil and wanting to collect Cora's soul. And the Crooked Man comes through and he wants the lucky bone. And naturally, he doesn't want to give it to him. He doesn't want to give his soul. He doesn't want Cora to die. And Hellboy and Joe are caught in the middle. Joe just wants to kind of research everything and understand everything. And Hellboy, he's just kind of like indifferent. He like seems to care to a certain extent. But like I said, he's not really a fighter. So like when the Crooked Man comes around or Effie comes around, Hellboy doesn't really do much. Like, he'll pull out his gun occasionally, but he ends up not firing it, or Joe will, like, push his hand down to not fire it. So Hellboy's just kind of like a spectator for the most part. And when he tries to get involved, I don't think he's all that effective. So I mentioned the snake earlier, right? Well, it's kind of just like a normal-sized snake. It wasn't some kind of behemoth basilisk or anything. Like, you know, what happened is Cora gets taken by this snake. Hellboy is watching it happen. She's getting strangled, bitten, killed by the snake as Hellboy just observes. And then he decides to act. So then he like grabs the snake bites him, he gets suplexed multiple times, and then eventually kills the snake. But it ends up fundamentally like killing Hellboy to us. Well, he doesn't kill Hellboy. It transports him to a different dimension. So then he's starting to see like his mom and Cora's there explaining like the sins and stuff. Like he can't even kill a fucking snake. You know what I mean? Like that's just underwhelming. Getting to the climax of the film though, they end up going to a church because Tom wants to bury his father. Turns out Effie turned his father into a horse. And that took a lot out of Tom's father, so he dies as a result of being a horse that was being ridden for so long. So he wants to take his father now to a church to bury him on, you know, the sacred ground. Crooked Man shows up, Effie shows up, Crooked Man's got zombies now, so he starts raising the dead, and this is when Hellboy finally starts to do things like he shoots a few of the zombies. The Reverend then blesses a shovel, and he, like, starts hitting zombies. Hellboy hits zombies with a shovel and shit like that. Like, the Crooked Man is not very powerful. I want to make that clear. They don't make the Crooked Man seem like a real threat. They just make everyone else seem like they're not capable of actually handling anything. But I will say, these scenes, I think, are the most visually interesting scenes. Like, I would have liked to see more of this. Zombies are beyond played out. It's beyond exhausting to see them. But it is nice to see Hellboy do things, as opposed to just kind of stand around looking cool. So, and I think they do a good job of actually having him look cool when killing these zombies. And blessing a shovel and hitting things with a shovel, how is that not badass? That's some stone cold Steve Austin shit right there. Like, that's good stuff. But it's so short-lived. Eventually, Reverend and Joe go into a tunnel. Tom and Hellboy go to, like, the Crooked Man's manor after they hit the Crooked Man with a shovel. Tom's got his lucky bone. He eventually uses it to do, like, a fucking stupefy on Effie, the other witch working with the Crooked Man. Hellboy starts hallucinating, so he's seeing his mom again. He ends up almost shooting himself in the head, but he breaks free of the brainwashing. And then the climactic showdown between Hellboy and the Crooked Man is really lame. He kind of spins Hellboy around with, his superpowers, kind of like how Saruman had Gandalf spinning in a circle, if you remember that scene. That's kind of what the Crooked Man does to Hellboy. He just kind of spins him around, throws him around a little bit, and then he gets him, like, lying down. So the Crooked Man comes over and he spits in Hellboy's mouth, so he's, like, puking out, like, a bunch of bugs and stuff onto Hellboy's mouth, and he's like, you could have saved your mom twice now if you just gave me their souls. The other guy, like, talking about Tom and stuff. And then Tom comes up the stairs, and he's got a witch ball, and he says, this is from Cora Fisher. And he throws the witch ball, which again is a shit nugget, like a furry shit nugget, and it goes right down the pipe of the Crooked Man, who turns around and eats it. It gets caught in his throat. So I guess that's the purpose of it. Like, you're supposed to throw it at someone and hope that they choke on it. So he starts choking on the witch ball, which Hellboy then capitalizes off of. So he starts beating on the Crooked Man a little bit, and it's really kind of silly because he like throws him down the stairs, and all of the coins that he was carrying start flying out of his pockets. It's like when Sonic gets hit in a video game and he just loses all of his rings. That's what was happening to the Crooked Man. Hellboy throws him down the stairs, coins fly out. Hellboy throws him down another flight of stairs, more coins fly out. And then it ends with him just shooting him in the head and more coins fall out. It's like when you hit the jackpot at like a fucking arcade. He just starts like spilling coins out of his skull. That's most of the main stuff. I don't think the movie is nearly as bad as most people probably expect it to be, but that doesn't mean that it's a great film either. I didn't like it that much. I wasn't bored by it or anything, and I do think there are moments they did a good job with it. But overall, the horror wasn't working for me, which was a huge emphasis for the film. And Hellboy being so passive and uninvolved in everything really wasn't working for me either. And if it's all about him being a detective, why is he bad at it? Like, I don't think he or Joe really were useful in progressing the plot. It was really mainly Tom. Tom was kind of the guy who kept figuring things out and pushing it forward, and Hellboy and Joe would just get the information from Tom doing these things, really. I don't think there was anything they did necessarily that was very helpful in connecting this mystery or anything. Nor was there really a mystery to solve. It was really, the Crooked Man is here, he's bad. Effie is here, she's bad. It's a witch, Crooked Man is taking souls, we gotta stop him. There wasn't much of a mystery in the first place to solve, so I just kind of wish they'd let them do more. If they're not going to be, piecing together an elaborate puzzle, let them start beating the shit out of witches and zombies. Like, let that happen a little bit more, you know what I mean? Again, I don't think it's a horrible film, at least not to the level I think most people were expecting it. And I've decided to look into what Hellboy comic fans think of it, and a lot of Hellboy comic fans really like this movie. And I'm happy to see that. Definitely wasn't for me, though. This was definitely not a film that I found a lot to love about. Again, I like the style. I like some of the decisions they made with, keeping it more small and localized. It really felt like a piece of a Hellboy show. It felt like you were dropped into the middle of a season of Hellboy, which is cool. I would love a Hellboy show. Have smaller scale stories like this, and you could definitely make it work. I think that'd be a banger. That's kind of what it felt like, but not quite to the level I would have liked to see. It was there were good ideas here that I don't think were executed all that well. But, again, is it worth watching? If you really like the comics, I think so. If you're more of a fan of the previous movies, probably not. If you like horror movies, maybe. If you're a big fan of very generic horror. Overall, though, it's not a bad time or anything. I didn't hate watching it or anything. So, yeah, that's really about it. So, yeah. Don't let the title confuse you. It's still not a good movie, but I don't think it's as bad as everyone is painting it as. I think it's overhated. Just saw Venom 3, The Last Dance. This is the final installment in the Venom trilogy, and it's definitely not going out on a high note. It's not exactly a banger to sail off into the sunset with, but I do think that it's not the pathetic punching bag a lot of people are claiming that it is. I've even seen some people go as far as to say that it's on the same level as a Madame Web or Morbius. That is ludicrous. You need to be institutionalized for thinking that. It's not a good movie by any stretch of the imagination, but I don't even think it's the worst movie in the Venom trilogy. Not that that's high praise or anything, that's like saying that it's the best piece of corn in someone's poop. Keep in mind, I am someone who has been very outspoken about not liking the Venom movies, much to the chagrin of Venom fans. I just think they have been really weak and forgettable. There were certain things I liked about Let There Be Carnage at the time, but I couldn't tell you a single scene in that movie now. It's just some shit to have on screen to hypnotize you for an hour and a half while you shove popcorn in your face and you forget about it, but you had a little bit of fun at the time. That's how I feel about the Venom movies. There's nothing special about them. This is probably the most mid-trilogy that has ever been made. It never was, terrible, except there was a lot I didn't like about the first one, but it was never, awful. But it's never been good or great to me. And Venom 3 is no exception. It's just an okay movie. It's just a average, alright film. So let's get into the things I liked about Venom: The Last Dance. The action. Pretty much just the action, really. And Tom Hardy's performance. I actually think he does a really good job as Eddie. I think he sells it well. He's just working with extremely weak material. I think the writing is trash. I really do think the writing across all three of these movies have just been bad. And I also think Venom, as a character, is strong. I think there is a good performance from Venom 2 if they just had better material to work with. It's just that writing is yikes. It's not good. But the action is. They crushed it with the action in this movie. It was extremely creative. I'm sure you saw a lot of what they were going to be doing from the trailer, like Venom taking over a horse and having a horseback moment. It just gets very creative with all of Venom's abilities and what that makes him and Eddie capable of in a fight. And there's a lot of action in the beginning and the end. The middle is an absolute slog, a chore to get through. It's not interesting. The story is weak, unfortunately. For the finale of this trilogy, I was expecting them to pull out all the stops. This whole thing is just a big fucking stop. Like, I'm gonna have to get into spoilers here. This is my biggest complaint. I'm gonna get into spoilers, fair warning. The story that Last Dance tells is by far the weakest of the entire series. They introduced Null, which everyone was super excited for. I'm unfamiliar with the character, but seems super cool in concept. And when they introduced him at the beginning of the movie, I was like, damn, I can't wait to see what this guy's capable of. We've got like a really interesting big bad villain. And then Null may as well just not exist in the movie. It is the biggest bait and switch. Null is, like, I have more of a role in this movie as a spectator than Null did on screen. He doesn't do shit. He is just trapped. He's just imprisoned. He doesn't even have more than 3 lines and has maybe in total 8 seconds of screen time, and it's just like quick glances, cuts to him briefly. It's such wasted potential. He never enters the movie. Instead, what they fight are his pawns. They fight his fucking minions, his henchmen, his sidekick. Not even his sidekicks. They're not that high up on the totem pole, on the food chain. They just fight his dogs. That is the main enemy they square off against. That's the climactic final fight with his damn bodyguards. That is so lame, especially as a send-off for this franchise, this trilogy. I just could not believe it, because I thought for sure, like, all of this was building to Null. And especially because at the end of the film, they start bringing in so many other symbiotes. They have so many really cool new symbiotes that get introduced right at the end to fight against the pawns. And I thought they'd defeat the pawns in like this really triumphant moment of teamwork. Like, hey, we've got to stop this guy. He's bad news. He's a real fucking jerk. And then Null would get free, and then they'd team up to beat him. And it'd be super hype. And it'd be so fitting if that's how Eddie and Venom part, is in that war against Null. That's not the case at all. They just fight the dogs. It's so underwhelming. I just felt so deflated when the credits rolled. Like I mentioned, the action is hype, and having all those symbiotes come into the fold and start fighting against the pawns was very cool, albeit underutilized. They basically had like 5 of the symbiotes throw out one attack to showcase one ability and instantly die to them. Like they got spawn camped. Like they immediately just got fucking blasted the second they decided to start attacking once they were able to. So that was kind of underwhelming, but it was still cool, like as an idea, and visually it was cool to at least see them throw out one attack. And I don't even think like the alien dogs are bad as characters either. They're cool, like they're menacing, they regenerate super fast. And also, I had to check my phone during this film to see if this was R-rated, because I thought it was. I was always under the impression that the original Venom wanted to be R-rated, but then they were a little afraid of how it'd perform in the box office, so then they edited it to be PG-13 or changed things to be more PG-13. And I always was of the belief that it'd be better R-rated. This film has to be probably the hardest PG-13 I've ever seen, because the alien dogs, when they kill someone, and they kill a lot of people, like humans and symbiote alike, they eat them, and it shoots all the blood and guts out the back of their head, like a wood chipper, just spraying blood all over the place. And they show that. They show it. And they actually show gore, too. Like, I was surprised that this was a PG-13 rating. I'm glad they did go hard with the action and violence, because it did help elevate those scenes that were already good and made better by that. But overall, I just found the film to just be mediocre at best again. Just another mid-okay film in this franchise that has only ever been okay. So I guess it's kind of fitting to a certain degree, but man, I just don't understand what like the idea here was with having this be the final Venom movie and have him only fight pawns. It makes it seem so small and like not powerful. Like the minions I know aren't weak or anything, but they are just pawns. So yeah, I don't think this is a good movie, but I do think it's not as bad as everyone is saying it is. I think if you go see it, you'll probably be entertained for at least 2 out of 3 parts of it if you can turn your brain off and not think too hard about what you're being told on screen and what you're listening to from the characters. Like, there are some moments that I do think work well between Eddie and Venom. Like, I do think the chemistry has been pretty solid throughout the series for the most part, and where it is here, like, the emotional beats kind of land, and would have if the writing was a bit tighter, but, like, it was close. But yeah, it's not good. That's really about it. It's okay at best. Alright, see ya.